What is up, everybody? My name is Kyle Matovcik. I am the host of the In Liberty and Health podcast, where we talk all things liberty, health, and wellness, and beyond. My hope is to encourage and spread the message of liberty and physical and mental well-being. I hope you enjoy all the topics we talk about with our guests. We're on all major streaming platforms, so please sit back, relax, and enjoy.
Man, I'm doing as good as anyone can do getting buried by his 13-year-old son on leg day.
I'm not going to apologize for not being on this podcast because I got to go see Metallica. So if that's a problem, kiss my ass.
Okay?
All right.
Cool. All right, everybody. This is In Liberty and Health, episode number 110. I've been trying to put this one together, and I'm pretty sure since I first started this podcast, I wanted to do this, but I'm glad. I feel like it's the right time to finally do it. I have the leading and the supposed most racist man in the world, Michael Heise, with me today. How you doing, dude?
I'm good, man. I'm only like the second most racist. Yeah, there's always somebody better.
Yeah, I'm sure there's somebody knocking you out there. You know, it's funny. I watched your thing with Reason, and you were talking about Jordan Peterson, and something kind of clicked for me when you mentioned that. And it seems like you and him are the two like most misunderstood people on the face of the fucking planet. Have you ever had that same thought?
I mean, not really, just because I feel like I guess it's at another level now because I'm like, you know, I got the Southern Poverty Law Center article and all of that stuff.
Well, that's my point.
Prior to that, it's like, oh, it's just like the small handful of losers that are pissed off that they're losing. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I've had relationships with people in the party for quite some time now, you know, and people are really nice. I don't really have trouble when I go places and all of that. It's all confined to this fake reality of social media, you know, until, you know, the Southern Poverty Law Center thing came out. But even that, like, I mean, you want to talk about one adorable face of hatred. I mean, look at their article with like my face and Jeremy Kaufman, and it's just like the goofiest thing. Like my picture is the goofiest. Like I literally look like this. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, that's a hate leader. Okay.
Yeah, dude, it's ridiculous because a lot of the people that I've met through the LPMC have been nothing but kind to me. And yeah, there's shit posters, but like there's like this idea that people who post memes on the internet are all like inherently racist and bad people. And that may be a small faction of the people that's in the community that is the Mises Caucus. But it seems like this gets extrapolated out and everyone gets this blanket, you know, you're a racist, you're a terrible person. And the funniest thing of all, and something that you also said in that recent interview, was a Trump supporter, essentially, right? You know, we're basically enabling Trump to get elected again, which is the funniest thing because you had said, you went out of your way in the interview to mention that you felt like a lot of libertarians weren't hard enough on him, which is something that I have said and a lot of the people that I've actually had experience with in the Mises Caucus have seemed to agree on. So it's kind of funny that they leave that part out in the Southern Poverty, whatever the hell it is, the Southern Poverty Law Center article and all these other people who claim that we're Trump supporters.
And not to mention just the very simple logic of, let's say we're a bunch of Republicans, okay? And we're a bunch of Republicans that are leaving the Libertarian Party and saying, hey, you know, let's get somebody else to run against the Republican. And then somehow this equals supporting Republicans. You know what I mean? Like it's just nonsense. It's just, honestly, dude, it's people who, there's always a good, like in any domain, you know, like our domain is the Libertarian Party and like liberty activism and liberty politics and all this stuff. In any domain, you're going to have your subgroup of like complete miserables who wish that like they might even be smart people, you know, but like being smart is not enough to be successful. Like you have to apply yourself. You have to You have to have a good idea. You got to sell people on that idea. And I really think a lot of it is just people who are miserable because they project out how things should be in their head. And then the things that actually generate success aren't commensurate with like that mental image that they project. And they get angry about it. And yet they have nothing to show for it. You know what I mean? Like they don't have any success to show for it, you know, and they're just angry that this thing that, you know, in their mind should never have worked, did work or does work, you know, and it's just kind of a repudiation.
Yeah, and it's really interesting to hear a lot of the people who were formerly kind of the regime of the Libertarian Party kind of come to knock you and all the work that you've done and where everything's at now, because there's a lot of energy and enthusiasm and financial gain ever since the Mises Caucus has taken over the Libertarian Party. And one thing I've heard you say in different podcasts, and I kind of want your updated feelings on it now that we're like about a month out. As a musician myself, I can empathize with your feeling of nobody's going to show up, nobody cares, and this is going nowhere. Do you still kind of feel that way after convention, or do you kind of feel like, holy shit, I actually did this? Like, is there a sense of relief?
That way, I think people. I think me is I feel like I don't look the part, and I feel like my background is pretty modest and pretty average. So like with that, I think I'm always going to have a tinge of that. And honestly, I think it's for the best. I think it helps keep me grounded, and it helps me to, like, you know, I work, that feeling drives me to work really hard. And you know, I mean, I knew that we were going to do good here in Pennsylvania, but I didn't know that we were going to be 80-20, you know, and you know, that kind of fear drove me to make that many more calls and, you know, all that kind of stuff. And it's the same thing with national. You know, I knew that we were going to do good, but I didn't know that we were going to do 70-30.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy to think about that and put that in perspective, that you literally had people from 48 different states driving in, flying in, whatever, traveling to Vegas to show up for this thing. And it wasn't like the culmination of you know, one specific event. This was years and years in the making. And it's, you know, the 10-year overnight success, essentially, except for this is more like a 5-year overnight success. So it's cool to see not only the, I don't want to say the bad guys, but the loser brigade, with, for lack of a better term, kind of lose and then see a bunch of people who truly do bear the ideas that we share together now represent the party. And I still see people nitpicking at the LP National Twitter. And it's so funny to me. It was literally like a week after people like, oh, the left is still taking over. This is no different. I'm like, it's literally been like a week. You know, what are we supposed to do? Just disassemble the Federal Reserve and the entire federal government from, you know, day one?
I saw somebody who were like, oh, you know, the Twitter put out like something positive about Juneteenth, and like, I thought we were done with all this stuff. And it's like, bro, the LP National Twitter is quoting Hoppe. Like, count your friggin' blessings, dude. Like if your knee-jerk reaction is always to try to find that negative, you're never going to be happy. You know what I mean? Like you're just never going to be happy, and that's like a personal problem.
Yeah, you know, I completely agree. So this is something that I don't think I've heard you talk about, but and we don't have to obviously attack personal people, and I don't want to. But this whole post-libertarian thing, I have to admit, I've been swept up by it for a brief moment and had varied feelings about it, and I believe there's valid critiques. But what are your thoughts with the whole post-libertarian moment, if you will? Because it seems like a lot of them kind of want to go back. I don't want to say go back to the Ron Paul days, but they're obsessed with the idea of being right-wing and taking political power. And I believe there's something to take away from there, but sometimes it just seems like this circle jerk of being right-wing. So what are your thoughts about the post-libertarian moment?
So I think there's definitely things to take from it, but overall, like on the whole, I think there's a lot of things that they're misguided about. Sure. I think anytime, and again, you know, you mentioned Jordan Peterson, and I'm highly influenced by Jordan Peterson, and I think those guys could really use Jordan Peterson, because I think there's a really important psychological aspect that is missing from, you know, from what they're getting at here when they talk about, oh, well, we need to take power. Anytime like you are in a mindset where you want power for power's sake, you know, they tend to just not address the fact that that's a tug on the human condition, just the same way that alcohol is a tug on the human condition. And it doesn't just exist in a vacuum, you know. Yeah. And it's also not true, as we've seen in the Libertarian Party, it's not true that ideology is the thing that makes you a good person that can be trusted with power. You know, there's a lot of trash libertarians with it. I wouldn't vote for just because I know them. You know what I mean? Like, you know, that is a missing element from their whole thing. And so when your whole strategy is animated by, I want to take power so that I can take vengeance on my enemies, your mental incentives are not lined up to where you're going to be the pinnacle of mankind that resists the tug on the human condition that power will have on you. And I also think it's kind of funny that they don't have any power. Like, it's all just like pontificating. Yeah. And that's why I think it's so easy to talk about. Whereas, you know, granted, it's not a lot of power, but we have some modicum of power. But again, I don't even like thinking about it as power. Again, this goes into kind of like the mental arrangement, or the way that you approach these things and act out these concepts. Is I tend to think of it more as, I don't have power, I have a responsibility. And I think when you kind of arrange your value hierarchy and look at it that way, that is going to have deep implications on how you act one way or the other. You know, and I've gotten into conversations with some of these guys, they're like, well, you're just playing word games. I'm like, no, I'm really not. It's like the kind of thought experiment that I would say is a corollary to this is like, you know, the whole, is the glass half empty or is the glass half full thing? Well, it's both. Like, logically, non-falsifiably, objectively, it is both. So, you know, what that says to me is that there is certain limits to logic. You know what I mean? And logic can go really far and it can do a lot of things, but it also has limits. So then the implication of that is, well, what happens when you act out either premise? If the glass is half full, you know, we'll use that as kind of a metaphor for optimism or pessimism.
Sure.
You know, what happens when you act out the premise that it's half empty? You know, what happens if you act out the premise that you are black pilled versus white pilled? And this is something that I think is very missing from their outlook. You know, but there is things that I think to be taken away. Pete in particular has, you know, he's talked a lot about, oh man, we can't be in Kapistan in our heads. And what he's getting at is ideological possession. And that's true. You know, right. But the problem is that that's not a libertarian problem. That's a human problem. You know what I mean? Like, that's, you know, the whole country is being pushed into ideological possession and being validated by their in-group that is also ideologically possessed. And this is kind of the result of politics investing everything, you know? And I don't think the antidote to that is to do the equal opposite and swing the other way. It's you know, you got to do something that will actually diffuse it, not inflame it. Like, we should be looking to how to diffuse the culture war, not how to annihilate one side. You know, and I think that's kind of where they're going, and that's a very vengeful mindset, and vengeance and power are not a good mix.
Yeah, and well, the other thing is that as much as we're all pro secession, pretty much all the way down to the individual decentralization, I feel like that's going to be a very, very slow process. So when you punish the left, right, and whatever you define as left, because what I've noticed is that basically it boils down to, in their terms, is that left is egalitarian and then right is hierarchical. And I feel like, and this isn't a conversation that I'm fully fleshed out on or really think about all that much, but I feel like it's a lot more fluid and a lot less rigid than what it's being told as. So when you just want to punish the supposed left, then now we still have to live with these people to some degree until we get to this and Capistan, right? Because that's essentially what we're kind of shooting for, and what I think our common goal is. So if you punish these people, then, if we're not fully decentralized or localized or whatever, what does that look like? We're back to this tit for tat or eye for an eye. We're back to this white hot culture war where everything has to be an arm wrestle rather than just trying to diffuse the situation by other means. And I don't have a perfect solution for this. And I don't really see them having a solution other than you just have to absolutely crush them and remove them at any chance you get. And I sure there's time and place for that, but once again, what's the kind of end goal here?
For them?
Yeah, well, yeah, for them, and then obviously for us, because I believe that the LP is a little bit more welcoming of perhaps left-leaning people. Now, obviously, they may take that the wrong way, but like I said, my question is, what would be the end goal of a tit for tat for people that you still have to live with? Because
it's annihilation. That's right. I mean, that's the logical conclusion is annihilation, and they would say, I don't want to live with. And again, think about the mental makeup of that. Mm-hmm. You could sit here and have the best ideology, but if your ideology is animated by vengeance, you're not going in a good direction.
Right.
Because the human condition is deeper than your ideology. It's you know what I mean? And this is just something that's ignored. And, you kind of touched on, they kind of play their own semantic games. They define the left and the right in a way that just happens to perfectly align with their ideology. And, and not in a way that anybody else uses it, So, yeah, I think they kind of got their own little ideological possession thing there, but I think it's generated from fear. Mm-hmm. I think, I don't want to like toot my own horn here and shit, but like, I think the power of the state was still mentally to a lot of these people abstracted. It wasn't real until COVID.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not trying to like pound my chest, but some of us have seen it as very real ever since we understood their willingness to commit genocide. I think that they got freaked out, from COVID and how real it got, and that they're basically becoming right-wing neo-reactionaries. But the thing is that there's always some great emergency for us to be scared shitless of and give up our rights to, or adopt a narrative to. If it's not terrorism and sleeper cells, it's COVID, or it's always something. I mean, it's just basic. It's just the basics of being an effective tyrant. You can't have happy people who know themselves that you rule over, because then they would realize they don't need you. You need scared and quiet people.
Yeah.
People against each other. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's divide and conquer. It is almost cliche as it is. It's true though. One thing
it's not a coincidence. One last thing. I don't think it's a coincidence. I don't think it's a coincidence that we're being maximally divided via politics while also being impoverished through inflation.
Do you want to elaborate on that a little bit? That's actually, I've never heard it put out that way, but that's pretty interesting.
I mean, again, if we're going to accept the premise that the state has its own incentive structure that it's beholden to, and it has its own agenda, which is to maintain and grow its power, and share that power with its friends that help them stay in power, like the cathedral, then again, they're not. It doesn't behoove them for the people at large to be unified, or the people at large to see them for their true nature. Mm-hmm. So I think they know full well that the inflation is out of control, and I think they know full well, maybe not. Yeah, I doubt they've read like the Theory of Money and Credit from Mises, but I think they know that we can't just print our way out of this and all of that. And I think they might have, call me a conspiracy theorist, but if we're on a collision course with hyperinflation and the end of the dollar at some point, there's obviously going to be some attempt after that. You know what I mean? Right. To have a new control system, and they're going to need to have a level of control and a level of compliance to where that goes generally unquestioned, as you have this kind of reboot. And So I think it behooves them to have us against each other and divided. And, you know, what do you see? You see politics infesting every aspect of life.
Yeah.
You know, we don't like even whatever vestiges of are left of free markets. That isn't even like the markets are politicized. You know, Roe v. Wade happens and it couldn't make it one fucking day before you have a whole bunch of corporations who are like, well, you know what? I hate pro-life people and I'm going to pay for you to have an abortion. Meanwhile, we all know that that's just like, you know, helping their bottom line. But my point is that they're involved in this political narrative at like every level, and it's everywhere. And that is inherently divisive. And at the same time that is happening, the inflation is getting out of control. The gas prices are getting out of control. The markets are unreliable. You see all this volatility in the stock market. And so the natural result of that is that when things get bad, we're not going to be relying on each other because we've been trained essentially to distrust each other.
Yeah. So do you think the next?
So then, what's the result of that? It's to say, help me. No, go ahead.
Oh yeah, no, you're good. You're good. Do you think the next natural step? And I didn't plan on kind of going down this road, but I'm kind of glad because it seems like we're working there. Do you think the next natural step is ESG scores, the environmental, social, and governance scores? Because that kind of seems like what they're really going for with the destruction of the currency and this extreme divisiveness and this culture at large where we're supposed to believe that, you know, the plant-based diet, the environmental harm and all this stuff, where you could basically rank people, and then also kind of shifting towards, I don't want to say transhumanism, but also kind of transhumanism, honestly. No, you're good.
I just lost
yeah, man, that's good. Yeah, my internet could be pretty choppy sometimes.
Sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, dude, you're good.
All right. Yeah. Sorry. I plugged my charger in and it took me off my earbuds here. So again, this is going to get into some kind of like tinfoil hat territory. But I don't think the transhumanism stuff is going to be for the people at large. You know, I think it's going to be, you know, it certainly isn't going to proliferate. Let's put it this way. As it comes into fruition, it's going to be at the very top of society before it trickles down anywhere else.
Sure.
And you know what companies are producing these technologies? It's Google. It's Boston Dynamics. It's these companies that are basically just getting government grants, and that's where all this research is coming from. So, you know, I think I think it behooves them to have machines doing their will, and you can never have anything gumming up the works. You know, so you see these videos of these like robots doing backflips and shit, and that's like one piece of technology. It's just like the fluidity of the movement and everything. And then you have other technology, like I'm sure you saw that story where I believe it was a Google scientist was like convinced that the AI that he was working with was sentient.
Oh, no, I didn't see that.
Okay, yeah, this was like a week ago. There's an entire transcript that and this is the transcript that basically made this dude determine, like, yeah, this thing has feelings. And it's crazy. It's I don't really know what to make of it, to be honest with you. I haven't. So to level with you, I have been like out of the news for quite some time because I've been so in the trenches organizing. So I'm kind of shooting from the hip on all of this. But yeah, I mean, what if it's weapons contractors and stuff like that that are producing the technology? What do you think it's going to be used for? Peace?
Yeah, right. Yeah, well, that's all. You're more well read on it than me. I kind of listened to some people talk about it, but it's like I don't even know where the hell you start with all that stuff. Was there anything else you wanted to add there? I kind of wanted to get back to some of the LP stuff.
Nah, go for it. I'm way more versed on that.
No, dude, you're good. It was just kind of like I said, it kind of reminded me of the whole ESG conversation. It might be my internet. My internet's known to be pretty choppy. You got me? We cool?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Cool. Yeah, my internet sometimes drops out. Yeah, it's been a pain in the ass. So yeah, I've just listened to people briefly talk about the ESG stuff, but I like the fact that you guys changed the planks at the national convention. So do you want to kind of lay out those changes real quick, and then we can kind of shoot the breeze on that? Because to go back to the post-libertarian, some of them are saying that this is still conquest second law. Any organization that isn't explicitly right-wing will inevitably go left-wing. I don't know how much I believe that. But just what were the platform changes you guys enacted at Reno?
So there was a plank that was explicitly pro-choice that had been around for a very long time. We got rid of that completely and replaced it with nothing. So now the Libertarian Party, has no official stance on abortion, which is, actually representative of libertarians. Libertarians are very divided on this issue. A lot of it comes down to whether or not you are a minarchist or an anarchist. And the difference in first principles between those two things and how that manifests through this issue.
Sure.
You can't have a friggin' abortion plank that outlines, well, there's this first principle difference between these two groups and a manifest. That's just like wonky and who cares? You know what I mean? Like, so that was one. There was, there still is a plank that talks about government discrimination that had a line in there that had us calling it the woke plank about how bigotry is irrational and repugnant. And that was taken out and replaced with a sentence about how the Libertarian Party will uphold the rights of all people at all times. We added secession back into the platform, which I think is huge. We added a definition of property and aggression into the platform, which I also think was huge. Those recent interviews made it out like we had changed anything about immigration, but we did not. Although I would argue that maybe we should be neutral on that for similar reasons as why we should be neutral to the abortion play.
I got you. Yeah. Well, I think those were all positive changes because it definitely did kind of, as you guys have said before, de-wokify the LP and is more welcoming to people that, as they would say, Trump supporters or conservatives, or people who are just considering another ideology because they've seen that the Democrats and Republicans have failed them. So when you remove the more social justice, woke kind of planks, once again, it feels a little bit more welcoming for people who, honestly, I think that our beliefs are a little bit more compatible with.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and the whole thing is because you get these people, and it was the same thing with like Joe Jorgensen's, we have to be anti-racist tweet, where it's like they just repeat what that means on the surface, like, yes, of course, on the surface, being racist is not a good thing, right? And like, we're not trying to suggest that it is. But again, there's just a difference in people who, you can't fight the enemy if you aren't even aware of the tactics that they are using against you. You know what I mean? Like, and this language, and it was the same issue with that. It's a case of them not even realizing or acknowledging, or in the worst cases, telling you that you don't know what you're talking about when you bring it to their attention, the tactics that are being used by the enemy. And, this is something where I actually have been pretty critical of something that Jeff Dice has said on this front, where he's like, oh man, maybe the word libertarianism has worn out its usefulness. And it's like, no, and the big point here is that I generally agree with the premise that politics is downstream of culture. And this is why the Libertarian Party needs to be focused on injecting itself and its principles and a narrative into the culture so that we can change that culture, and that's going to change the way that people think. But when you break that whole idea down, what is culture? What are the component parts of culture? Well, one of the primary components of culture is language. So, and meaning that the language that you inject into the narrative is the tip of the spear, so to speak, of the culture. And so when the left is able to get everybody to adopt its language, which is attached to its narrative, even if you don't get that that's what's going on, you are, and I don't mean this like in an insulting way. I mean this in like by the actual definition of the term, you are a useful idiot.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of people who are just not engaged in a deep enough level to where they see that how language is being obfuscated and redefined to be used for political purposes, to craft a specific narrative for certain political purposes. And that's what's going on. And we have to be aware of that and see that and notice when that's happening to us. And we need to start doing it back to others. You know what I mean? But for us to do it back to others, we can't then take their language and their narrative and repurpose it. We have to have our own narrative, our own language, our own tip of the spear for our culture. And, that's, I think, like really one of the most important things. And it's very nuanced and it's beyond, it's something that's a little bit deeper than just, well, libertarian principle dictates that the proper policy is this. It's like, no, now we're getting into tactics in the real world and what the hell is being done to us. Like, how is it possible that the American people have just, for 100 years straight, have just been sucked down the progressive hole over and over and over and over again? Like, how did that happen? Did it just happen out of the ether, like randomly? No. Or is there or is there an agenda to, kind of reform the institutions and getting Hollywood to kind of regurgitate the narrative with your language and all of this stuff to make it all appear as if this is normal, this is popular, you're the weird one if you're not like this. That's the kind of stuff that we need to be engaged in as well. But again, if you can't even see that this is happening, you certainly aren't going to identify it and fight back against it. And I think that's what's happened here.
Right. Yeah. And it basically what I would boil that down to is that the old Libertarian Party was just very culturally inept and there was no cohesive culture. So one thing that I'm glad that I've noticed with the Mises Caucus is that there is a culture, right? And I really didn't realize this that much until I had Reed Coverdale sitting in this room right here with me. And we were kind of talking about it. He's like, I was able to travel across the country and not have to pay for a hotel and sleep in people's houses all over the country because of the Libertarian Party. And one of the critiques would be, well, why do you need a political party for this? Well, it's not that you necessarily need it, but it's been a very effective vehicle in shifting or creating, fostering, whatever you want to say, a culture that's bringing liberty-minded folk together. And yeah, it may not be the Republican Party that's going to elect Dave Smith in 2024, but you can't overstate how important it is to at least plant the seeds of a culture of people who care about liberty and who share these values, at least, kind of the big libertarian values that, you and I share together. Once again, we don't know what this looks like a couple years down the road.
Right. And I would say that question that I know you answered this like a hypothetical on behalf of others, but well, why do you need a political party to do this? The presupposition that's in that question has the entire framework backwards. And this isn't something that I realized until I would say a couple of years ago. But it's not that you need a political party to do this, but it just so happens that the political party offered the framework and the structure by which this could happen. And again, it's like, you have to kind of pay attention to, people need to abandon their hopes of what does work and start to take stock of what does work, even if the thing that does work isn't what you would prefer. And I would say the fact of the matter is that the project that we are all embarked on has in fact produced this culture, and that should, in and of itself, should be evidence of the utility or the rightness, I guess, of what we're doing. And why isn't this culture being generated by other efforts? And there's been a lot of different strategical tracks taken over time, and yet this is the thing that is doing it. Why? When I started this, I would not have told you at that time okay, well, what the real thing here is that the party is going to act as a framework for us to build a culture on. And that's the actual thing. Not necessarily even the ideas or we're going to elect local candidates. It's not that. It's that we have a community, and out of that community has emerged a culture, and that is the animating factor. And it appears to me that you have to have some kind of common cause to bring everybody together to engage in that culture. And the irony of it is, now that that culture has taken place, and like the example that you just used with Reed, I think speaks to this, is that there's all kinds of other stuff that has nothing to do with politics that is happening as a good outside of this. There's people trading with each other. There's people helping each other move. There's people helping each other get jobs. There's people, all kinds of stuff, that. So not only do you have like the political element, but you have the community element, and then you have, dare I say, the agorist element that's happening as a natural result of that culture.
Right. I couldn't agree more. And I think that's perhaps more important than all the political stuff, because I think we all see how bad of a situation we are here in the US when it comes to monetary policy and all the other things. And I don't know if anybody really has a great solution as to how we turn it around. But in my mind, the way I see this playing out is that, let's say everything does fall apart, the dollar falls out, and whatever happens. Well, wouldn't it be important to have this kind of network of people that you trust and that share your values that's kind of expanding, and then to be able to have a cohesive group of people with a voice who can speak out against what comes next, or can kind of explain how we got to where we are?
Absolutely. But I want to say, though, because this is one of the foundational ideas of the whole strategy is, and I've had conversations with Justin Amash, and this is like a key difference between his outlook and our outlook, I would say, or the presuppositions that we're operating off of. I don't think there is any turning it around.
Yeah.
I don't think you could come back from printing $12 trillion or whatever the fuck it was in 2 years. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think there's any coming back from that. And I think the ship will eventually sink. So then the question is when that happens, and we are, like, as we discussed earlier, there's going to be some attempt at rebooting the control system into, who knows, a digital currency or whatever. But there's a really exciting prospect in all of that too, which is we have a choice. We have a choice of what to do. And are we going to accept that new control system, or are we going to reject it? I don't see how it could possibly be rejected unless you have a whole shitload of people who know what the hell happened here, who are in positions at that local and state level to say, no. Like, you're blaming this on freedom, you're blaming this on capitalism, you're blaming this on greed, you're blaming this on whatever. But I actually know exactly what happened here, and you are in fact Satan. You are the devil, and you're gonna have to kill us. Yeah.
Yeah, dude, I got you. So I guess one question, and just before I ask this question, I'm on your side, and I agree with you that I don't think that this is the route to go. But some of the critics may ask, why not the GOP? And I think I've heard you talk about this a few times. But I guess one more time, and there's a few points I kind of want to add on to this after you kind of answer this initial question. So why couldn't you do this in the GOP, or why did you choose not to do it with the GOP?
So a couple things. One, the GOP, I understand the appeal of the GOP. Like I'm not going to sit here and do the Lolbert thing and be like, well, no, if you're a Republican, then, no. I understand the appeal. There's a built-in voter base. And you think you can trick them into supporting you. There is perhaps a higher floor to power. And, if you're in a red district or whatever, and you just get past that primary, maybe you could win. And I understand all of those things. But it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about narrative and language and culture. Let me give you an example, like two examples. Now, I understand Ron ran as a GOP, but again, we're in a different world, and that plays a big part in this too. But Ron never, let's say, draped himself in the culture or the narrative of the GOP. He might have been running as a Republican, but nobody actually saw him as a Republican. No problem.
Right.
And you know, then look at Rand Paul. Rand Paul has achieved more power. You know, Ron was always a congressman. Rand is a senator. And yet, if you go outside of libertarian circles, and even in some libertarian circles, although I think it's unfair, you know, if you talk to people outside of libertarian circles, to them, there's not much difference between Trump and Rand Paul. Now, on its face, like if you look at the facts of this, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that's ridiculous. But that doesn't matter because Rand is playing a fundamentally political game, whereas Ron was playing a fundamentally idea game. As a result, Rand has now draped himself in the narrative and the culture of the GOP. And sure, he might have more power as a senator, but there is no cultural Rand Paul movement as a result of that.
Right.
And half the country hates the GOP. You know, I'd rather be obscure than hated because a garage band can always make it. You know, but Milli Vanilli's never coming back. That just never happened. You know, and you know, the Republicans I think have proven themselves to be of no use to stop the left. It's been 100 years now. I don't know how much more evidence you need. They've proven that it can never be a home for us. And so I don't, because you're always going to be behind enemy territory, like behind enemy lines when you're operating within the GOP as a libertarian, it's really hard to build a community and a culture in a war zone. Like it's really hard to build the culture in hostile territory. You're always watching your back. We always have to calculate, all right, how do we manage our principles with maintaining our position and, you know, and all of that. So it's hard to build the culture. And the big difference is that we are not beholden to the media anymore.
Right.
The paradigm of the media is dead. And what that means is that we now have the opportunity to access these huge platforms that have all eclipsed the media and come out on our own terms with our own narrative. And it just so happens that we're able to do this at just the exact time that, you know, the GOP just sold us out on guns. Yeah. You know, they gave us the Trump checks. That's the fucking inflation wave. Yeah. You know, they didn't cut a penny of spending. You know, like they didn't do anything. So why would we want to, in this moment where we can now reach millions and millions and millions of people, would we drape ourselves in that narrative and that culture that is hated by half the country, no matter what arguments you put forth? You could be Rand Paul and who is objectively not Trump. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. And it doesn't matter. You're Trump because people don't act out the premise that their political philosophy. This is why the whole narrative thing is so important. They don't act out the premise that their policy prescriptions or their political philosophy are the things that are most important to them. They act out the premise that their families are the most important things, or their culture, or their jobs, or whatever. And they don't necessarily bite down on policy per se. They bite down on the narrative, and the narrative is the thing that grips them and then informs where they need to go with policy and all that stuff. So again, we can't be adopting the narrative of the things that got us here while we're also now, for the first time ever, able to go out and reach millions and millions of people. And then we go out and you know, by we, I'm talking, you know, there's, I mean, I've been on Tim Pool, but Dave regularly gets to go on Tim Pool. Dave is friends with Joe Rogan. And then what's the response from the people that run these platforms that have access to millions? It's not just that they're interviewing us, they're bestowing the legitimacy that they have to their audience onto us. It's working. We're just coming from a way lower floor. And we're going to have to grind it out. But yeah, I think if politics is downstream from culture, we can't adopt a failed culture, like adopt a failed narrative that has resulted in a failed culture.
Yeah, and see, this is the reason why I could never get down with the GOP. And you know just as well as I do, the GOP here in Pennsylvania is absolutely abysmally terrible. And these, you have to essentially lie to them about a lot of the way that we feel about things. You know, oh, well, maybe we don't agree on China, but we agree here. Maybe we don't agree on the war on drugs, but we agree here. There's a lot of different areas where I feel like you have to compromise or honestly straight up lie to people to tell them what they want to hear when it comes to GOP candidates. And to kind of tack on another point here, Ian Smith had just recently became part of the Libertarian Party. He did the show probably a couple months ago. And, he ran as a Republican in New Jersey. And I thought, okay, well, hell, he should get it. This dude's, he has national notoriety. He's been on Tucker Carlson. Everybody knows who this dude is. So why would he not win? But then, surely enough, the GOP never came out and endorsed him. You saw the same thing, Kathy Barnett here, who was terrible because she wanted to go to war with China. But she was a very populist right-wing candidate who was kind of like independent, right? Well, why didn't the GOP pick her up? Shane Hazel, when he ran as a Republican, why did the GOP go after him? He was very strong and knowledgeable in the Constitution. I think people have this idea that the GOP is just ripe for the taking. And it seems to me more and more so that that's just not the case. And yeah, you can point to Anthony Sabatini or whoever, but honestly, they kind of peddle the same bullshit that the regime peddles sometimes.
Yeah, and again, it's the same narrative. And if politics is downstream from culture, and our movement, then if politics is downstream from culture, and that means that the thing that we need to change the most primarily is the culture, so that we can later down the line get the political wins from that, then we have to infect the culture on our own terms. I don't know how I can simplify it more than that.
Sure.
And if we're running as Republicans, we're not doing it on our own terms. It made sense in the past, because again, to me, the linchpin here is the fact that the media is dead, and that we have access to all these platforms. That is the linchpin to what I'm saying here. When Ron was running, the only thing that he could, and he did do this, but the only alternative media that he had access to that really even existed was like Alex Jones.
Yeah.
You had to go, all roads went through the media at that point. So yeah, he did what he had to do, but it's a different world now. It's a different world. And Joe Rogan, he voted for, he has publicly talked about how he's voted for Jorgensen. He's publicly talked about how he voted for Gary Johnson, and he was a Ron Paul fanboy back in 2012. That is now people talk, like you said, oh, Ian Smith, he was on Tucker Carlson. Everyone knows who he is. Joe Rogan gets about 3 or 4 times the listenership that Tucker Carlson gets, and Tucker Carlson is the highest rated news show on television.
Yeah.
And that's just one. Tim Pool, I did a super chat while Angela was on there. Would you support Dave Smith running for president? Absolutely. I absolutely want that. These are all of the people who are infecting the counterculture of the country. This is where the actual conversations are happening, where the information is being disseminated is in this patchwork of podcasts. It's not in the media. And might that take a little time to proliferate and to work its way through? Yeah, it is true that politics is downstream from culture, which means you got to build that up. But I don't think you can really look me in the face like with a straight face and say that libertarianism is not becoming more a part of the conversation in the culture.
Yeah, honestly, throughout this call, I couldn't agree more. We've been shooting the shit for about an hour now, so I guess I'll ask you a few closing questions unless you had anything else to add.
I'll go for it.
Cool. Mike, what does liberty look like to you?
I would say it's the maximization of choice. It's maximization of opportunity, people, and the maximization of self-determination. And that's the one that I think people don't understand the most. But it's the absence of power, it's the absence of coercion, and the maximization of cooperation between people. But sometimes cooperation isn't cooperation. It's we're going our separate ways, and agreeing to do that. And, that's a part of it too. And that's fine. But I would say self-determination, cooperation, and I guess it's freedom.
Nice.
Choice.
Yeah, that's definitely a different answer that I got from just about anybody else. I really like that answer. What does health look like to you?
Processed carbs. I'm not the pinnacle of health. I'm working on it.
Nah.
But no, I mean, in today's world, I would say health looks like discipline.
Mhm.
It looks like, you know, education, because it's very, very easy to be not healthy today. So it's almost like an act of rebellion to be healthy in a fucked up way. But yeah, I would say health is discipline. You have to figure out how to even be healthy anymore, because everything is processed. Everything does have refined sugars. Everything does have, you know, carbs, and then the fats that are in foods are not healthy fats, and you know, all of this. I'm no guru on this shit, and I know you are. So, but yeah, I would say health looks like discipline.
Yeah, dude, I know you're working hard on it. And, I remember when Tom Wood shouted you on a status saying that you were you turn on some rap lyrics or something like that and go for a run on the treadmill. But, you know, we're all kind of plugging away and trying to find our own stride here whenever it comes to health and stuff like that. And I'm certainly no exception to that. I've talked about it on the show plenty of times. I've had issues with binge eating because I was on unsustainable diets for me. But you know, like I said, everybody's just trying to find their own way to health, and I'm a supporter of anybody who's pursuing whatever means they feel necessary to improve their health. And I know that you're kind of along that journey as well, as we all are. Do you got anything you want to plug? Anything cool going on in the near future for you?
That was it. It was just 2 lightning round questions.
Yeah. Those are normally the last 2 I ask every guest.
Gotcha. So I would say, if you like what I have to say, then go to takehumanaction.com and fill out the form that we have there. That'll get you on our email list, but it won't just get you on the email list. It will have your information routed to your state organizers, and they will reach out and try to pull you into this community and this culture that we keep talking about. And, you know, even if you're not political, I would say you should check it out just for that community, and then maybe you end up getting involved for the fun of it with that community. So takehumanaction.com. You can sign up there. Misesmerch.com if you want to check out all of our designs. We've got the Hapa Doing What Must Be Done Since 2017 shirt. We've got a whole line of, you know, like Be Brave with Ron Paul or Be Radical with Rothbard. And yeah, takehumanaction.com, Misesmerch.com.
Awesome stuff, man. Well, Mike, it was a blast having you on. We'll definitely do it again, man. And like I said, if there's anything else you want to plug, if not, we'll get out of here.
Just lp.org/join. You know, now that we completed the takeover, we should all be flooding in and, you know, making the new LNC look good.
Awesome. Well, Angela's at the helm there. She's been a guest on the show twice, and she'll be a guest on the future, as I hope you will. This was a great chat. She's an incredible person, and she's definitely a firebrand and a great torchbearer for liberty. So, yeah, man, like I said, this was a cool chat. So, like I said, if nothing else, we'll close her out.
Appreciate it, man. Thanks for having me.
Yep.